See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Hello and welcome to The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. Lots coming up today, including the latest from Scotland, which this morning has announced its first cases of the new COVID variant, Omicron. We're also talking parliamentary standards, microplastic filters and debt advice. Plus, the latest Real Me interview is with MP Rosie Duffield, who speaks movingly of her experience of domestic abuse. First, here's your news with Rosie.
Thanks, Gloria. Let's get you up to date. I'm Rosie Wright with your news at 12 o'clock. 9 cases of the COVID Omicron variant have now been detected in the UK, with 6 cases identified in Scotland. The Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon says there's no evidence that community transmission of the variant is sustained or widespread, but there is still cause for concern.
The number of mutations that it has and the nature of these, and some of the very early indications from southern Africa, have raised the concern that this variant might be more transmissible than Delta, which of course is currently the dominant variant in Scotland and many other countries. There is no doubt that this presents potentially the most challenging development in the course of the pandemic for quite some time.
Meanwhile, the World Health Organization has warned the variant has an unprecedented number of spike mutations, and that could impact the trajectory of the pandemic. The Director General also says South Africa shouldn't be punished for making the discovery.
The emergence of the highly mutated Omicron variant underlines just how perilous and precarious our situation is. South Africa and Botswana should be thanked for detecting, sequencing and reporting this variant, not penalized. Omicron's very emergence is another reminder that although many of us might think we're done with COVID-19, it's not done with us.
Well, the UK, the EU and the US were quick to impose travel restrictions following the discovery of the variant, which South Africa's president has criticised as unjustified and unscientific. Well, currently, the Cardiff and Munster rugby teams are stranded in South Africa, isolating after squad members tested positive for COVID. In other news now, the Deputy Labour leader has called for a 5-year ban on lobbying. Angela Rayner wants the system regulating the conduct of MPs to be reformed. She also says her party is against using contacts to lobby ministers and that people should get contracts based upon their competency.
Our democracy cannot hinge on a gentleman's agreement. It needs independent and robust protection. So today, I am setting out how a Labour government will clean up our politics and restore that trust. And we will start by setting tougher rules. We will ensure tougher enforcement of those rules, independent of political control.
A teenager has been remanded in custody after appearing in court, charged with the murder of a 12-year-old girl in Liverpool. Ava White was stabbed in the city centre last Thursday and died from what police described as catastrophic injuries. The 14-year-old boy, who can't be named for legal reasons, was also charged of being in possession of a blade. The sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell is set to begin today in New York City. The British socialite denies recruiting teenagers for Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse from 1994 to 2004. She's been in jail in US ever since her arrest in July of last year. Court documents suggest that Maxwell will claim the alleged victims may have false or distorted memories. Network Rail has issued a warning after teenagers were caught on CCTV doing handstands on a level crossing. The incident took place in Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire on a track used by trains travelling up to 80 miles an hour. Police say the girls showed a blatant disregard for their own safety and others. Several other people were filmed standing or lying down on the track to take photographs. Manchester United have appointed Ralph Rangnick as the new interim manager. He takes the reins until the end of the season with a 2-year consultancy deal to follow. First team coach Michael Carrick has been caretaker in charge for 2 matches since Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked just over a week ago. You are up to date. I'll be back with your headlines in half an hour. Right now, back to the briefing and Gloria.
Coming up this hour on The Briefing, we'll have the latest on the standards row as questions about how MPs behave won't go away. And the new COVID variant, Omicron, has spread to Scotland. We'll have an update from there. I'll have my latest Real Me interview with Rosie Duffield MP. She speaks powerfully about being a survivor of domestic abuse and explains why she's not anti-trans. And give me your political briefing. Send in your views and opinions by emailing gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. We have heard a lot about plastic pollution of late, and much of it is invisible. Microplastics are so tiny that we're consuming them without even knowing. A third of microplastics come from clothing. A single wash can release up to 700,000. I'm delighted to be joined now by Alberto Costa, the Conservative MP for South Leicestershire, who chairs the all-party parliamentary group for microplastics and also sits on the Standards Committee. So, Alberto, it's always a pleasure to see you. If you will forgive me, before we talk about the really important campaigning work you are doing this week on microplastics, but could I ask you for your reaction to the Labour Party suggestion to ban former ministers from lobbying, consultancy or any paid work relating to their old roles for at least 5 years? What do you reckon?
Well, I'm delighted to be back on your excellent programme, Gloria, and to announce, as part of being a member of the Committee on Standards, that at 2 p.m. today, the Committee on Standards will be officially publishing its report on reviewing the Code of Conduct. I know that the chairman of that committee is making a public announcement as we speak to the media about that. But in essence, it's going to be open for consultation for civil society stakeholders and others to give evidence to the Committee on Standards on the report's proposals. And I'm going to wait to receive that evidence from civil society stakeholders before I make a decision on any of the issues which are contemporary news today. OK, thank you for that. Let's talk about microfiber plastics. First of all, what are they? Where can we find them? What effect are they having on us? And tell us about your plans this week, Alberto. Thanks, Gloria. Well, it was only a few years ago that the Women's Institute for our country was lobbying MPs in Parliament, and they have a campaign called End Plastic Soup. And probably like many of your viewers, I had no idea what they meant by plastic soup. And they explained to me that every time we wash our clothes, an average washing machine cycle discharges into wastewater about 700,000 microfiber microplastics. And what these are is all the clothes that we wear contain synthetic textiles, and those threads shed microfibers. And it's believed that every month there are trillions of microfibers ending up in our marine environment. So what my bill seeks to do is to require all washing machine manufacturers to place at a very reasonable and modest cost a microfiber filter in all new washing machines. And that means we can remove the offending pieces of plastic which are too small to see by the naked eye. We can remove them at source and ensure that we can continue to wash and clean our clothes, enjoy fashion, but at the same time protect our marine environment. That's what my bill seeks to achieve.
And just let's be clear, what is the effect that microfibers have on us? What damage do they do?
Well, that's a good question. The two main ways in which microfibers enter our environment is just wearing clothes and walking around. We're shedding microfibers from our clothing and we inhale these microfibers. And we don't know what the long-term damage to animal life is, to human health is. What we do know is that when we wash clothes, we discharge an enormous amount of these microfibers, and they either end up in sewage sludge, which is then placed onto agricultural fields where crops are, or it ends up in the marine environment where often it can be ingested by marine life, and it can eventually end up on our plate in the fish that we eat. So we don't know at this stage how damaging it is to human health, but what we do know is that we're polluting our planet, and we're polluting it significantly to the tune of trillions of microplastic microfibers every month from the washing machine cycles alone.
And you are trying to change the law tomorrow to make sure washing machines fit this filter, all new washing machines by 2025. First of all, will the government, you're a Conservative MP, but you're introducing this privately as a backbench MP. Do you think the government is going to support your measures to change the law on this?
I think the usefulness of introducing the bill is to get the conversation going, and that's why I value coming on to great programmes like your own. Because actually it's not just a conversation for members of Parliament. Much more importantly, it's a conversation that all of your viewers ought to be having. I want your viewers to understand the damage that we collectively do by washing our clothes without having a filter, discharging all this plastic that we can't see with the naked eye. So my bill seeks to raise awareness of that, and the government is taking some very welcome measures to cut plastic pollution in society. And I'm confident that given countries like France have already legislated for this, given that some washing machine manufacturers themselves, like Beko, that owns Grundig, have already started fitting microfiber filters into washing machines, I just think it's a matter of time for the bill that I presented to eventually turn into law.
Is it going to cost us if your proposals become law and washing machines companies, manufacturers have to insert the filter into their machines from 2025, will they potentially pass costs for that onto us, or are they quite welcoming of what you are suggesting? Have you discussed it with them?
I have discussed it with them, and the Washing Machine Manufacturers Association were part of the report that the all-party group prepared in this issue. I think broadly there's two schools of thought. One school of thought among some washing machine manufacturers is that this presents a new market to them, that they can augment their existing products by having premier products which are greener for the environment. But actually, the actual filter itself is not a costly item. It's really just a small piece of plastic that has to be designed and attached suitably to the drainage of the washing machine. And I'm confident that these devices, which from what I've seen already thus far, I'm confident these devices can be developed and manufactured at a very modest cost. So I don't expect any notable impact on the costs of washing machines. What I do expect is a notable impact on improving the marine environment by keeping out these trillions of microplastics that we currently emit into the marine environment.
And just briefly, could I ask you, can we do anything here and now to limit the spread? Does it help to do a shorter wash, or, well, wash less frequently, I suppose, is the obvious answer? Are you proposing, or would you recommend things like that?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. Look, I want us to move to a green economy, protect our environment, but I want human beings to enjoy a high quality of life. And cleaning our clothes is a basic hygiene. So I'm not at all suggesting that people stop washing their clothes, not at all. What I'm trying to do is bring in a very modest measure that will not cost the consumer any notable amount of money, but will remove from the marine environment millions, billions, indeed trillions of microplastics which we currently emit through simply washing our clothes. So it's really a case of your viewers being more aware of this, your viewers maybe asking washing machine sellers themselves, if they sell washing machines with filters, to get the market on board as quickly as possible. And the law will then come in terms of regulation and having a standard filter. But there are filters already out there. Some washing machine manufacturers like Beko, as I've mentioned, who own Grundig, already produce some washing machines with filters. So it's very much washing machine manufacturers, the government, and your viewers working together to ensure that we protect our marine environment.
Alberto Costa, Conservative MP for South Leicestershire. Always a pleasure to have you on GB News.
Thank you.
Good luck with the campaign. I'm sure we'll speak again about it. Thank you. Now, a week ago, we hadn't even heard of it. Now the new COVID variant, Omicron, has just reached not just England, but Scotland too. We'll have the latest after the weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's cold out there. It will be warmer by tomorrow. Most having a dry day today, but there is some wet weather across northwest England, Northern Ireland, and particularly western Scotland, created by this weather front. But it is a warm front, so it is slowly but surely going to introduce milder air. However, out there today, as you probably know, it is pretty cold, despite quite a bit of sunshine across eastern England. One or two showers grazing Norfolk, but they're clearing away. The cloud will continue to increase over the Midlands, and we'll see some drizzly rain on the west coast of Wales, the coast of northwest England, and particularly wet across western Scotland. Some snow likely for a time here over the hills as the breeze picks up. It is a cold day, though, but it is starting to turn milder in the northwest. We may reach double figures late in the day. That rain will continue to track southwards. A bit of snow still mixed in for a time, but turning more to rain as the milder air arrives. Now, before that mild air arrives, there will be a touch of frost through this evening across parts of the south, but by morning time, the milder air is much across the UK, and temperatures will be well above freezing to start Tuesday. It will be a grey start, a fairly dank, drizzly, misty kind of day. The rain fairly persistent across northern and western Scotland. Rain on and off for Northern Ireland, northwest England too. Further south, not much rain, but staying fairly grey for most of the day. But it will, as I said, be an awful lot milder than it is out there today. Temperatures widely up to double figures. Notice some heavier rain coming up to the northwest later on in the day, and the winds picking up as well. That rain will spread across Scotland and Northern Ireland during tomorrow evening, before a band of rain swings across England and Wales during Tuesday night. And that will then reintroduce colder air later this week. So the weather chopping and changing somewhat. We should see some good spells of sunshine, especially on Thursday, but it will be colder by then, before perhaps turning milder again on Friday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, Monday to Thursday from 4 p.m. till 6 p.m. We don't lecture to you or try to tell you what to think. We do a deep delve into a topic with views from across the range of debate, therefore leaving you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. Join me, Alex Phillips, for the afternoon agenda on GB News, 4 till 6, Monday to Thursday. You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Now, from tomorrow in England, masks are back in secondary schools, shops and on public transport to try and stop the spread of the Omicron COVID variant. Here we go again, eh? We don't know enough about the new variant identified in South Africa to draw any conclusions about threats to Christmas so far. What we do know is that the government and international community is taking it pretty seriously. And after 3 cases were identified in England over the weekend and a further 6 cases have been identified in Scotland, we also know the variant is here. Our reporter, David Donaldson, is in West Lothian for us and joins me now. David, good to see you. Has the First Minister reassured people about the festive season?
Yeah, Gloria, yeah, she has. She was asked about that during her media conference earlier this morning, and she said that there are no plans to put any guidelines in place just yet. However, she was keeping an open mind about it. Obviously, it's a developing situation, as she said, and she was obviously said that things may change, but at the moment there will be no change and no plans to implement any more restrictions during the festive season. So that will come as a welcome boost to many, no doubt about that. Families trying to meet up during the festive season, people travelling across the country as well. However, she has said that that could change, and I think it's one that they're just going to have to keep an eye on. And I think we'll hear more throughout today and certainly tomorrow morning when she gives her weekly COVID update. We'll know more then as well.
Scotland and Wales often go a bit further than on restrictions than we do in England. Might we see details of that tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so. We've already seen the First Minister reveal that she had written a joint letter with the Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, to the Prime Minister that just says here asking for increased measures for people travelling into the UK, including PCR tests on day 8 as well as day 2. So you can already see that the two countries have linked up to try and stop the spread of the Omicron virus within both of these countries. So we'll see how that pans out. We'll hear from Boris Johnson to see what his response to that letter is. In terms of travel restrictions, obviously Scotland has gone in line with England in terms of some of the Southern Africa countries to stop people coming in and make sure that they take the right tests there. So that's certainly a step, but there's been no plans yet for any travel restrictions. She was also asked, the First Minister, about a circuit breaker. I think it's a little bit too early for that. I think we need to know the extent of the spread of this disease in the west of Scotland to determine whether that's going to be an option or not.
David Donaldson, thank you very much indeed for the update. No doubt we will speak to you again throughout the day and throughout the week. Now, times are pretty tough out there, and more people are turning to loans to pay the bills. Short-term debt can be a lifesaver, but it can also spiral out of control and leave borrowers in a real mess. There are services out there that can help, but availability of face-to-face advice has plummeted, and that's even before any fresh COVID concerns. Support for those in debt is collapsing at a time when the most vulnerable in society need it most. Let's speak now to Emma Hardy, the Labour MP for West Hull and Hessel, who is leading a parliamentary debate on Wednesday this week. Emma, welcome. Nice to see you in the studio. You know what's really interesting because of the way that we do this programme is you can really tell the campaigning MPs are who they are, because we often speak to you. Alberto Costa is another favourite. Are you in, before we talk about the detail, are you, because you've served on the front bench for Labour, but is it the campaigning that really inspires you and motivates you?
Well, absolutely. If you're a shadow cabinet member, then of course that has to be your focus. So when I was shadow universities, that had to be my focus. But really, I want my focus to be on my constituency and what's going on there, which is why I've been on your show talking about flooding, talking about endometriosis, now talking about debt advice. These are the kind of local campaigns that you simply don't have the time for if you're also a shadow minister at the same time. It's really difficult to balance those different priorities.
Well, you are definitely motoring on the campaign front. Since you mentioned shadow cabinet, there is a reshuffle, we understand, underway. Now, I know what those days are like. Is the phone going to ring? All of that. Tell us, what do you know?
Nothing.
No, that is the truth, isn't it? You never know anything.
You don't. And I've been following on my WhatsApp. I was on the car over here going, what's going on? What's happening? Who's in? Who's out? Nobody knows. I mean, all we know is officially Kat Smith has resigned because she's put that out on her Twitter. But we really don't know. We don't know what's happening. So it's kind of quite exciting. But of course, you know, the other side of it is you do feel for the special advisors, you know, that work with the shadow ministers.
These are the staffers.
Yeah, absolutely, the members of staff, because if, as the shadow cabinet member, you lose your job, they lose their job as well, and they're the kind of people we don't always remember. So,
very good point. Because I was when I was in the shadow cabinet and I resigned, I had to wait till my political advisor at the time woke up. It was Sunday morning. And I thought, I can't, and I was getting lots of pressure, announce. But actually, you're absolutely right. I was saying, I'm not going to announce anything before I effectively tell somebody that they've lost their job because of my actions. So you're right to point that out. So you have you're leading a parliamentary debate on Wednesday. Tell us about what it's about.
OK, so at the moment, the Money and Pension Service offer contracts out to different organisations to give debt advice, and they're changing it. They're going through a process of recommissioning. And what this means, in effect, is they're looking at instead having big regional call centres giving advice and moving away from that face-to-face debt advice. Now, in my opinion, in the opinion of many people I've spoken to, face-to-face advice is essential, because if you've got really bad debt worries, I don't think you can get that same level of support on the end of the phone or on a web chat. You want to see a human being. You want to sit there and have a conversation with a real person who can give you that advice. And the brilliant thing about organisations like the Citizens Advice Bureau and ones like that is you might go about debt advice, but then they also might be able to say, well, here's where you can get help for your mental health if you're also struggling with that, which comes hand in hand with problems with debt often. And also here's where you can get help maybe with welfare and other forms of support. They offer that full service that you're not going to get on the end of a phone.
So just let me be clear about this. So this service, the Money and Pension Service, so this is a government sort of body that allocates money to things like the Citizens Advice Bureau and welfare support.
Kind of, yeah. So the Money and Pension Service give money out to support debt advice, and they give it to Citizens Advice Bureau, or it might be Step Change, or it might be various other charitable organisations in the community to give debt advice. But they're changing things. And what they want to do, as I say, is move towards more of a remote offer.
Why?
Well, they say that more people want to access debt advice remotely on the phone or on a web chat. But I'm kind of thinking here, I think the COVID has an impact on this, because they asked people during the COVID pandemic, how would you like to access your debt advice? And we were a bit shocked when everyone went, well, I'd rather have it remotely. Well, of course.
Of course.
It's in the middle of a pandemic. Whereas actually those people who really need help need to see that human being. And that's what this debate is about, saying keep that face-to-face debt advice.
And who are we talking about? Who are the people or groups of people? It may be just random, but are there any trends that we see in people who really do need that debt advice? We're talking, can we visualise particular people?
Well, it's a huge variety. I mean, it can be people with young families, anybody who's recently been out of work or been made redundant, but also vulnerable adults, maybe adults who have some other kind of, additional need and need that extra support. But it can be a huge variety, or older people perhaps who aren't as confident accessing that remote, that remote service. I mean, it can be anyone and everyone. I think this is the thing with debt advice. We imagine it being a certain type of person, but it can be anyone. We've all been there, I think.
And is this sort of service, is it useful to tell people what benefits they are entitled to? For example, if they've suddenly lost their job? Because it's quite a quagmire, isn't it, the benefit system, to work out what you can and can't get?
It's so complicated. So this is the thing with the Citizens Advice Bureau. You're seeing that real human. They're giving you advice about your debt, but they can also say, well, have you looked? You might be entitled to your child benefits, or, there are other things you could be supported with. And as I say, a big issue is mental health, because when people have, debt problems, we know you're laid up worrying. You wake up in the middle of the night worrying. In the morning, it's the first thing you think about, you're worrying. If you go to the Citizens Advice Bureau, you see, they can say to you, here's where you can go for support with your mental health as well. You're not going to get that on a web chat.
Yeah, that's right. Do you think debt problems are increasing? I mean, unemployment, is down. The jobs market looks buoyant. But do you notice any trends in your own constituency surgery on this?
Absolutely. I think, the cost of living is increasing, and therefore my fear is debt is going to increase, because you think about all those families who are described as the just about managing families, the families who get by but they struggle each month. If we're seeing inflation continue to rise and expected interest rate rises as well, suddenly people are having to make larger payments to manage their debt because interest rates have increased. That could tip a whole new group of people over into needing that additional support with debt advice, and they're the people I'm really worried about, those who are just about managing to get by. But any increase in your gas bill and your electric bill, interest rates on credit cards, are going to see that whole group struggle.
Yeah, that is a really good point. The government had the press conference, just to move on to COVID, which we're all worried about. We hoped we'd turn the corner, but we're all having to think and talk about it again. The government Prime Minister had the press conference on Saturday. There'll be an update in the Commons this afternoon. They seem to be moving quickly, but in the Labour Party's view, do they need to go further right now? Should there be what's called the full Plan B? This is sort of half of Plan B that they've done, the mandatory face masks.
Well, I just think better safe than sorry. That's the way I see about it. So, yes, let's move on to Plan B for the next couple of weeks until the scientists have worked out exactly what's going on with this variant. I was on the call with the Secretary of State on Saturday night, and what they've said is the scientists are taking this new variant. They're running loads of tests on it to see how transmissible it is, how serious it is, what impact it has on people, all those questions that we don't know the answer to. And they'll have those answers in 2 to 3 weeks. So, in my opinion, let's just, take extra precautions, and let's be a bit careful for the next 2 to 3 weeks. And hopefully we'll be told by the scientists, actually, panic over, everyone calm down, Christmas is as normal. But if not, then at least we know we've taken those precautions to try and, have a bit more of a normal time. So I just think better safe than sorry.
And finally, the Standards Committee will be issuing a report of some recommendations on how MPs may behave, or the code of conduct, ways to improve that code of conduct. Do you have any thoughts about how we can sort of move on from that terrible conversation about sleaze and second jobs and all of that to a better way forward, which will increase trust in our public servants?
Well, I mean, to me, it's quite simple. In any other job, if you worked anywhere and you were found guilty of misconduct in any form, you would face sanctions and probably lose your job. It just seems a bit unbelievable that we don't have the same rules for MPs, or that the Prime Minister can decide which minister has broken, sanctions and which minister hasn't. And it's like, how can he make that decision impartially when it's his own ministers? We need to make this independent, and that's what Labour are calling for. Let's have an independent body to look at who's broken the rules and then look at providing them with the most appropriate punishment.
Emma Hardy, always fantastic to chat to you. Thanks very much for coming in the studio today. And I'm sure we will chat again. A wonderful campaigning MP. Thank you, Emma Hardy. Coming up, the latest in my special series of interviews where we speak to the person behind the politics. Today, Rosie Duffield talks heartbreakingly about the reality of living in fear of domestic abuse. That's after the news.
Thanks, Gloria. I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines. 9 cases of the COVID Omicron variant have now been detected in the UK, with 6 cases identified in Scotland. The Scottish First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, says there's no evidence that community transmission is sustained or widespread, but there is
the number of mutations that it has and the nature of these, and some of the very early indications from southern Africa have raised the concern that this variant might be more transmissible than Delta, which of course is currently the dominant variant in Scotland and many other countries. There is no doubt that this presents potentially the most challenging development in the course of the pandemic for quite some time.
Labour has confirmed Sir Keir Starmer is reshuffling his front bench, despite the deputy leader earlier saying she wasn't aware of any such plans. Well, Shadow Cabinet member Cat Smith has announced she's resigning and returning to the backbenches. She also tweeted a letter warning of the damage caused by not readmitting former leader Jeremy Corbyn to the party. The sex trafficking trial of Ghislaine Maxwell is due to begin in New York City today. The British socialite denies recruiting teenagers for Jeffrey Epstein to sexually abuse from 1994 to 2004. She's been held in a US jail since her arrest in July last year. Network Rail has issued a warning after teenagers were caught on CCTV doing handstands on a level crossing. The incident took place in Broxtowe in Nottinghamshire on a track used by trains travelling up to 80 miles per hour. Police say they showed a blatant disregard for their own safety and others. You are right up to date. I'll be back with more on all of today's top stories at 1 o'clock.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Welcome back. Now, it's time for my series of very special interviews with MPs where we go behind the politics and get to know the real person. Today, it's a really powerful conversation. Rosie Duffield, the Labour MP for Canterbury, talks living in fear, domestic abuse and being labelled as transphobic.
My mum trained as a nurse and then got pregnant very young, so that was interrupted. She was 21 and a bit when she had me. My dad was working, I think, in construction and decided that he had to make money. There was a baby on the way, came to London from his little village and joined the police as a trainee police person.
You leave school at 16
Mm-hmm.
and I know before you were in Parliament you were a classroom assistant at the primary. school classroom assistant. Did you have different jobs before that?
Yeah, I mean, it's not brilliant career-wise. If you leave school at 16, I'm not recommending it to anyone. And, you know, I didn't enjoy school. I'm not very good at being told what to do. I think a lot of MPs are rebellious types of people, actually, and kind of go their own way. And I just wanted to get out in the world, out into the real world. And I joined a YTS scheme. Now I guess that would be called an apprenticeship. Worked at Guy's Hospital, did various different things, sort of temped and bummed about a bit, really. And yeah, just sort of enjoyed working and being in the grown-up world. Eventually, when I had children, I trained again to be a teaching assistant, and I loved it, absolutely loved it.
How old are your children?
22 and 18.
Gosh, my goodness me.
And they're at uni now, or one's on a gap year.
Because what's extraordinary is that you look very young.
Thank
and
you.
You're actually 50 years old.
Yeah, really old.
What did you love about being a classroom assistant?
Just love children. I really miss them in Parliament. Occasionally you see the little nursery train going past and I was just, oh. But yeah, I really love children. They just say it like it is, and they're just little sponges, and just being with them every single day. And I worked in a couple of schools that weren't very affluent. One of the schools I worked in a village in my constituency, a lot of the parents were from the army barracks down the road, and the dads at the time were on their tours of Afghanistan. Those children needed a lot of TLC. They used to play at being snipers, you know, at the age of 4. And sometimes all they needed was just to sit down and read a story, and kind of at some part of their mind they were stressed and really worried about their dads going away and their mums. And it was like being a mum, really, but being paid to be a mum, and that's brilliant. So,
it's not a well-paid job?
No, not really.
What sort of wage do you get as a classroom assistant?
I got about £7 an hour, I think, £7.50 sometimes. It was hard, you know, but it was what I was used to. I was comfortable.
You've had some struggles in your life, and you've been open about them, including domestic abuse.
Yeah.
Just tell us in your own words what you went through.
I went out with someone and sort of swept me off my feet, was really pursued me. He was very keen, and every time I met him, he'd buy me presents and kind of really go over the top and insist on paying for everything. And I was, you know, struggling financially, and you know, he was quite a flashy kind of person, and I really fell for it. He really made me feel like a bit of a princess. It didn't take long for quite a nasty side of him to appear, but I was completely in denial. I didn't recognise it at all. I just kept making excuses in my head or blaming myself for something I'd done. He just got more and more controlling. I mean, things like I'd meet him in a local bar, and if I was just a minute or two early and I'd already got a drink, he would go to the bar and insist on paying and getting me reimbursed and then give me the money back. So that seems lovely, but it was really controlling and really just a bit strange. And I was more and more uncomfortable with him, so I split up with him. The election happened, I concentrated on that snap election. And as soon as I was back in Parliament, it was, you know, it was this huge, overwhelming shock for me. And I was kind of on my own, and that was weird. And he got in touch and said how proud he was, and just started saying, you know, I knew you before, I still love you, I knew who you were, I'm not after the glamorous life, you know, that kind of thing. And I was lonely, and it did work, you know, so he kind of wooed me back. Big mistake. So,
did his behaviour, what happened to his behaviour when you took him back?
He was extremely charming, just reassuring. And again, because it was this link to when you're single in a job like that and suddenly you've got this high profile, there are people who maybe have a different motive, and I was warned about that by friends in Parliament. And I didn't know who to trust. And there's this guy coming along and saying, you know, I loved you when you were a teaching assistant. I don't care about this job. It's you're just you. And he was saying all the right things, you know, and of course I fell for that. I thought, this is safe, I know this. And nothing else felt safe in my world. My whole world had just turned upside down in a great way, but it was a huge shock. And I had this familiarity. And again, with all the taking me out to dinner and all the presents and all those things. And then he sort of announced that he was going to leave his job and live in London, and it was all a bit, wow, a bit overwhelming, but I went, okay, if you really want to do that. And then very shortly afterwards, he sort of moved in with me and was asking me to marry him within just a couple of months, but it felt as though it was kind of a continuation of the last relationship that we'd had. So it didn't feel that, I was just really confused by it all, and it went so fast, but it didn't feel that fast at the time. And yeah, as soon as I'd said yes, things started to get really difficult.
Don't want you to say anything that you don't feel comfortable with. That's not the point of these things.
He just revealed a side to him that was quite frightening, and he was a very, very big man and went to the gym a lot, and I was, I'm quite little. And put it this way, I learned not to disagree with him or to offer another opinion quite quickly, because he would just, it would be bam, out of nowhere, he would just explode. And I thought, okay, I don't know what this is. I don't know what to do with this information. So I would keep apologising and then making excuses, and sort of, I learned to be quiet quite quickly, and I'm not a quiet person. So I didn't really feel that I could say anything at all. And a stupid thing happened at Christmas. I bought him some books because he was interested in this particular subject, and he was trying to write a book himself on it. And he was just so unpleasant. He said, well, I can buy my own books. And he went into a rage about that. And it was small things like that, and then they all added up, and then it got worse and worse, and I couldn't say anything at all. I couldn't walk in the room from work without, I didn't open my mouth when I walked in. It got to that stage where I didn't even say hello, because even saying hello was, somehow even that was, I did it wrong, or hadn't told him I was coming home, or I don't know, everything was wrong. Everything was wrong. So I almost used to creep in the door when I got home from Parliament, and sometimes I'd just go, I'd be tired, we'd been voting till the early hours because of Brexit votes and things, and I would just go straight into my bedroom, and the atmosphere was just absolutely horrendous, and I would just sometimes just go straight into my bedroom and just phone my mum, and just to have a bit of love, just to have a bit of familiarity. It sounds really nuts, but these things creep up on you. You don't suddenly walk into that situation,
How did you get out?
Some friends started to realise that I had changed, and when he was around, so he would come to conference with me and come to various events that we did, Labour events and things, and some stuff at work, and people had realised that I was kind of different around him, and close friends just kept saying, I don't know if you noticed the way he spoke to you, and they would sort of, and I'd be like, well, he's had a hard day, or, I would make excuses, and then, I started adding up those comments, and I suppose I realised that so many people were kind of raising red flags and saying that they weren't comfortable. And my mum then started saying something. She was very careful and cautious, and she's a counsellor, and a lot of her clients, she works for a rape charity, and I think she knew pretty early on that this was not a situation I should be in. And I started asking her questions about relationships that I think raised a flag with her. I just kept doubting myself and my instincts, which I shouldn't have done. But my friends and my mum were kind of reaffirming that actually my instincts were right. And eventually I realised I just couldn't carry on being frightened in my own home anymore. It wasn't very often that I was physically afraid of him, but he made it very clear that, it wouldn't take much for him to sort of snap me like a twig, really, or to properly hurt me. And he did take control in situations where, there are laws against it, That's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah.
God, Rosie, it's spine-tingling, actually, listening to all that.
So many women go through this, you know, it's not just me. And the reason I spoke about it in Parliament was because I often think about the kind of women that don't have networks and don't have anyone to notice, and I had people noticing. And I know that was what made a difference for me. And, you know, I often think about the kind of women that wrote to me after I did that speech and wonder how they are. And, you know, I had messages from their sons and brothers and people who were worried about certain women, and that won't go away, and I'm not going to forget those people. You know, it's worrying.
Thank you for reliving trauma. I think it will help other people, but it is traumatic to listen to. Rosie, you have had a very tough political year. You know what I'm going to talk about here.
Yeah.
And some people think you're transphobic.
Yeah.
Other people say, hang on, she's raising some legitimate concerns. Why is she being cancelled? Other people say, no, she's making us fear for our identity.
Yeah.
Let's just... two very different positions. Let's put it in your words.
I'm not remotely transphobic. I can't imagine wanting to discriminate or hate a group of people just for who they are and how they want to live. It's a bit like saying, you know, I don't like drinks or I don't like trousers. You don't dismiss a group of things like that, and I never would, and I haven't. And what might, you know, some people sort of interview me and say, you've been castigated because of your views on trans rights. I don't talk about trans rights because I think it's not my place to talk about trans rights. Trans people have got some great organisations and they're very good at representing their rights, and that is just as it should be. Trans rights are the same rights as everyone else. But what concerns me is that there is a slight conflict in some cases between trans rights and women's rights. Women's rights are why I came to Parliament and why I'm sitting here, because women are now visible in Parliament, and I grew up in a very strong feminist household. And what really concerns me are the rights of women to have privacy and space and the necessity to be in a women's refuge, not shared with someone with a male body. I mean, rape is a crime that is only committed with mainly one weapon, and that is a male body. And I want to protect women from having to be in the same space if it is really vital to them that they're not. And that isn't about transphobia. It's about making sure that self-ID, which is a little bit of the trans issue, is just not in conflict with women's biological rights. That's it. You know, I think we should be able to talk about that without being called transphobic.
You said there's really good trans rights groups, and you know the reason why you don't speak about trans rights is because you think that it's not your place to. But
it's not my lived experience. You know, I don't feel that I should do that really.
Some people would say you should be an ally.
I am an ally. In my mind, I really am. I want to be. I have trans friends and I speak to trans people. And yes, I'm not Jewish, and I stood up for Jewish people in the anti-Semitic row, but I also don't want to get it wrong. And I think what I know about, like the back of my hand, in my sleep with my eyes shut, is women's rights. And that's what I've tried to speak about. Yeah, of course I'm an ally, but I don't feel that I should be speaking about things that other people do speak about necessarily. I'm talking about women's rights.
Do you ever wish you'd never started on this debate?
Sometimes, but I'm the kind of person who can't really keep my mouth shut, so that's why I'm in Parliament. And I think I just saw all this stuff and hatred towards other women who were speaking about it, and I didn't really open my mouth. I liked a man's tweet, and since I liked a man's tweet, more has been written about my opinion than I had any idea about. I've very rarely spoken in my own voice about it, very rarely. I'm starting to now, but for a whole year and a bit, the argument about me being a transphobe was framed by a man who tweeted and that I liked it. So there were reams written about what transphobe I was, what I thought, what I said. I hadn't said or thought any of those things. But that is misogyny, because I hadn't opened my own female mouth on it, but I had liked a man's tweet. And all kinds of people were telling the world what I thought and what I believed. I hadn't said a thing. So I think I've been forced into it, really, to kind of defend and explain my view.
Do you like being a member of Parliament, Rosie?
Most of the time, it's the best job in the world. I love it, you know that. And yeah, I mean, you get to speak for all the people that contact you, and you cannot possibly speak for 120-something thousand people in my case, but you do your best, and you get to speak up for the people who also don't write emails or don't belong to a political party and don't know how to campaign. The people that I knock on doors to in the estates are not likely to have the luxury of the time to go along to political meetings because they've got childcare and they work themselves to the bone. And, you know, you also speak for those people. And that is the thing that we're here to do, you know, and I love it. I love that, yeah.
And you're basically teetotal, aren't you?
No, I'm just such a lightweight. I'm such a terrible drinker. I really am. I can't do it.
It's because you're tiny, probably.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
So how do you de-stress? I mean, this is a terrible question. This is like plays into the whole like culture of everything.
Coronation Street.
Coronation Street is it for you?
And too much chocolate, but yeah, I do drink, but just not very
Not like
well.
a lot of other MPs.
Not very well.
Including myself when I was there included.
I'm really rubbish at it, but yeah, Coronation Street is my happy place, actually. So yeah, that's really pathetic, isn't it?
No, it's been really interesting to talk to you, Rosie.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk to you for some time, and I'm grateful to you that you've given us the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You have been watching The Briefing with me, Gloria De Piero. The show is back every Monday to Friday from midday. Up next, it's On the Money with Liam Halligan, but for now, I'll leave you with your weather.
It's time to remind ourselves there's always another winter. Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hello again. It's cold out there. It will be warmer by tomorrow. Most having a dry day today, but there is some wet weather across northwest England, Northern Ireland, and particularly western Scotland, created by this weather front. But it is a warm front, so it is slowly but surely going to introduce milder air. However, out there today, as you probably know, it is pretty cold, despite quite a bit of sunshine across eastern England. One or two showers grazing Norfolk, but they're clearing away. The cloud will continue to increase over the Midlands, and we'll see some drizzly rain on the west coast of Wales, the coast of northwest England, and particularly wet across western Scotland. Some snow likely for a time here over the hills as the breeze picks up. It is a cold day, though, but it is starting to turn milder in the northwest. We may reach double figures late in the day. That rain will continue to track southwards. A bit of snow still mixed in for a time, but turning more to rain as the milder air arrives. Now, before that mild air arrives, there will be a touch of frost through this evening across parts of the south, but by morning time, the milder air is much across the UK, and temperatures will be well above freezing to start Tuesday. It will be a grey start, a fairly dank, drizzly, misty kind of day. The rain fairly persistent across northern and western Scotland. Rain on and off for Northern Ireland, northwest England too. Further south, not much rain, but staying fairly grey for most of the day. But it will, as I said, be an awful lot milder than it is out there today. Temperatures widely up to double figures. Notice some heavier rain coming up to the northwest later on in the day, and the winds picking up as well. That rain will spread across Scotland and Northern Ireland during tomorrow evening, before a band of rain swings across England and Wales during Tuesday night. And that will then reintroduce colder air later this week. So the weather chopping and changing somewhat. We should see some good spells of sunshine, especially on Thursday, but it will be colder by then, before perhaps turning milder again on Friday.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
Hi, I'm Alistair Stewart, and I really hope that you can join me here on